I'm Ben.
And I'm Al, and today Ben and I are taking a deep dive into our top 10 monsters from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft.
Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft has added a lot of really interesting monster stat blocks that either add new mechanics or have really interesting and horrific lore to dive into for your campaigns. And me and Al put these into a quick list of the ones that really caught our attention.
At number 10, we have the Strigoi, the first of which originating from spellcasters casting transmutation type effects on swarms of sturges, and now they have an unending bloodlust and hunger. Some of them wish to return to their former states, and others have embraced this new form and mimic vampires themselves. The Strigoi is a very interesting CR4 creature who has a lot of really cool effects going on. One of them being they can summon up swarms of sturges. Another, they can suck all your insides out of your body, leaving only your skin and equipment behind, which is a really gnarly effect.
I really see these working very well as a sort of mini-boss, as they are able to summon their own underlings, and then that proboscis attack is just really gnarly, especially at level 4 when you would theoretically be facing this creature. This thing can be really scary if it really focuses on one target. With that multi-attack, it's putting a lot of damage down for its level, and if it drops someone to 0 hit points with that proboscis, then they're dead. That's it. So this thing can be really scary. And I also think that this works well if you have a higher level party. If throwing a couple of these at your party, I think that would be a sufficiently challenging encounter.
These guys also have 120-foot dark vision, a pretty good stealth, and an ability to fly, and it's still early enough levels where flying creatures could potentially cause your party some trouble. I think this monster is cool thematically, and it's also at a good power level. It's pretty powerful, but it's not going to TPK all the time, which is really good.
Number 9 is Gallow's Speaker. These undead are amalgamations of the spirits of people who have died in an area where mass death is common. These undead are obsessed with their memories of death and endlessly mutter their tormented memories of the event. This creature is really, really interesting in its attacks specifically. Its Foretelling Touch attack has a really interesting Bane-like effect on it, subtracting a d4 from the target's next attack roll or ability check. And its Suffering Echoes attack is also interesting. It targets a wisdom saving throw, but only on the first creature it affects. It affects another 3 for free. So you can use this tactically as a DM and affect a player who is less wise than the rest of the party, making it more likely that you'll get all of that damage out.
One of my absolute favorite parts about this creature is the effect it can have on the narrative of your story. Maybe your party witnessed or contributed to a really devastating event, and now they are returning to the site, and now this Gallow speaker is there, and it remembers, and it was manifested because of this tragedy. Additionally, with its Foretelling Touch, if you miss an attack roll because of its effect, that Bane effect that it has on you, maybe you get a vision of your failure, and that causes you to hesitate. And then those Suffering Echoes, maybe it is racking your brain with these memories of what happened there, whether you witnessed it or not, and it's a storytelling device. Or you could even take it in the direction where you have the player reveal a traumatic memory that they have had as a character, and that spreads to the other party members, and they don't know why they're seeing this being evoked from the Gallow speaker. I think it's a really cool story-driven monster that you can employ in your games. At number 8, we have Boneless, which is a CR1 undead monster. These are created from the skin or flesh of people who once lived and have now been resurrected as this disgusting creature that can slide through tiny holes in the wall and don't have any skeletal structure whatsoever. These creatures could be created intentionally from those who have met a brutal end, or perhaps a necromancer created two undead from one body, creating a skeleton and a boneless. My favorite part about this monster is it provides some variety to some of those lower level undead that we are so used to seeing in D&D, like skeletons and zombies. And now we have this kind of third thing that we can play with that interacts really well and naturally with those tropes of undead. It also has this really cool crushing embrace ability where it wraps itself around a party member and tries to suffocate and blind them, and they have to rip it off or have a party member help them.
Something I really like about a lot of the monsters in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft is that they really inspire encounter design for me. The Boneless is so interesting because I can see myself setting up an encounter where it looks like the party is about to fight a group of bog standard zombies, but then the Boneless and skeletons split apart into two enemies, creating a whole new encounter. Also, this creature just really works for the horror genre. This thing is so nasty. I hate the art of it so much. And it would be really visceral describing how this thing moves and fights in combat.
Something also interesting to think about is if you have some bad guys that experiment with necromancy, this is an undead that is actually pretty good at scouting ahead to see if there's danger or defending the fort, because it can use that compression ability to move in and out of tight spaces, or just get the drop on party members without bones clanking around or zombies moaning as they enter the dungeon.
At number 7, we have the zombie Clot. Hordes of zombies are unstoppable forces that may, in their time, see themselves affected by all sorts of events. And the zombie Clot is born out of zombie bodies being crushed together into one amalgam mass. These things are really, really interesting when coupled with other zombie creatures, especially because of their flesh entomb ability. It does a really nice job of shutting down certain party members that either rely on mobility or need to get out of the direct line of fire in some way. It inflicts the restrain condition, which I really like. A lot of the creatures in this book inflict some really nasty conditions like petrify or stun. I like restrain a lot because the player still has agency in those moments, and this is really nice when coupled with other zombies because it gives those zombies time to move up and set up for an attack.
Next up, at number 6, we have the Relentless Slasher. These creatures once started out as potentially innocent people who have been corrupted by revenge and bloodlust, and now have entered a pact with a fiend. And in doing so, they now pursue lives of rage and gore. And specifically, the Relentless Slasher elects to do their business in silence, and they vanish into the night. What I really like about this creature is that it has a lot of flavor tied into it. In the description, it says that it pursues its target with a single-minded obsession, which gives me notes as a dungeon master at how it may act in the course of battle. Additionally, it has the Slasher's Knife attack, which is its main form of dealing damage, which has a really cool mechanic in it where it deals lingering wounds to a target, which deals damage over time. And this damage can be further compounded with the more slashes that the Relentless Slasher deals to that creature, which once again reinforces that tendency for the Relentless Slasher to be single-minded and obsessed with a target. Additionally, tucked away in one of its legendary actions, it's able to teleport, which has that vibe of being able to slip away into the night and not knowing where it's going to pop up about next.
I think Wizards of the Coast did a really good job of getting the vibe of a slasher film into a monster stat block. This really elusive and sneaky monster who dips in, deals a bunch of damage, and then teleports out is really evocative of that genre. I also really like that they put a lot of work into the Relentless Killer origins and giving you a lot of flexible inspiration on why this killer does what they do. And this is another monster stat block that evokes a whole encounter for me. I could see a fight with this creature either being in an abandoned building or a cistern or a forest, somewhere where they have a lot of cover. And they jump out, slash somebody, deal some lingering wounds, and teleport out again, making them really hard to keep track of on the battlefield. Number 5 is Carrion Stalker. These larval creatures infest corpses and wait for living beings to come by, upon which they will burst out and infest them with larvae, beginning their cycle anew. These creatures have a sort of facehugger aesthetic to them. One of their abilities allows them to enter into the space of a creature they attack and latch onto them, and you have to pry them off. And I just think that that is so neat. It's also really interesting that these are tiny creatures. They have a lot of hit points for the size they are, and they're CR3 too. And once again, we are finding a creature that has really interesting encounter design right in its lore text. Part of the lore is that necromancers sometimes want their zombies to be infested with carrion stalkers to sort of add on to their battlefield effectiveness.
Additionally, they have that larval burst ability that is once a day, which means that you yourself have the risk to be infected by these creatures, which really add to the horror element of these monsters. Next up, at number 4, we have the Bodytaker Plant. This creature subverts itself into a society, slowly converting individuals over to its side. If you become consumed by the Bodytaker Plant, you will come out a different person under the plant's control. Its main desire is to take over the world, essentially, because it believes that society would be better off if everyone was under its control. So right off the bat, we can see how this can be a really interesting hook for an adventure or a side quest. If the party is traveling to a town, especially one that they have already been there before, they might realize that people are acting just a little bit off, just a little bit strangely, and they're going to want to investigate. And the further they dig, the more they're going to find out that this town is being overrun by this Bodytaker Plant who is converting its citizens into this plant/alien-esque life forms that are under the main plant's control. Not to mention that the plant itself is a pretty gnarly stat block. Right off the bat, it gets 3 vine attacks in which it can grapple 3 party members if it hits all of them. And then after that, one by one, it can start shoving the party members into it, trying to convert them themselves. I think my only gripe with the Bodytaker Plant is that the podlings that it creates are a little lackluster. All they really have going for them is the telepathy with the main plant, as well as a slam attack. There is a neat little table that helps you establish how the transformed podling may act in their newer form, but the combat with them is really uninteresting. I would have really liked to see some, maybe even a vine attack from them when they realize the jig is up and they start to transform into more of a plant-like creature.
Next up at number 3, we have the Dullahan. This is Wizards of the Coast's crack at the sort of headless horseman legend. They are knights or commanders who let vengeance corrupt them and now haunt areas, killing innocents looking for their lost head. The Dullahan is the one mythic creature that we get in Van Richten's Guide to Everything, and I'll be honest, I am pretty excited that they've decided to take the mythic idea outside of Theros. The Dullahan is definitely a boss battle and is deserving of that title. Its normal attack can be absolutely devastating. If it crits, the Dullahan has a chance to cut off the head of the target, killing them if they can't survive without the head. I also really like their mythic stage. They create some death's heads and then also have some mythic actions that can be used to sort of coordinate with those. It's a really interesting encounter altogether, especially when you consider that you should have it on a nightmare. Like, he's got to be riding a nightmare. It's the Headless Horseman. And so he could be hopping like out of the ethereal plane, doing just a ridiculous amount of damage, and then disappearing again.
The only thing I don't like about the Dullahan is that it itself can't speak. And while that makes a lot of sense because it has no head, I wish there was some sort of telepathy or it could emanate a voice so you could better use it as a dungeon master. Sure, it can be cool to have a spooky headless horseman who is just messing stuff up because it is a gnarly stat block. But this could also potentially be a big bad if you kind of homebrew that a little bit because it is such a cool stat block. Next, at number 2, we have a CR 1/8 creature, the Gramishka. These creatures were created from the mistakes of novice spellcasters, and they are cunning creatures who have a taste for magic. They are in themselves unstable with the magic power that created them, and have a cool sort of RNG effect related to that. Now, a Gramishka in of itself isn't interesting if you don't have a party of spellcasters, so before you would employ one, I would make sure you have the chance of a character casting a spell. Because when they do, you roll on a small table of potential effects that could occur. Perhaps the spell rebounds off of them and they deal damage to everyone within 30 feet of them. Perhaps they gain a little bit of hit points. Or they could explode, and from the chunks of which they died from spawns a swarm of Gramishka, which has its own set of interesting abilities. And the swarm of Gramishkas is a pretty gnarly stat blocks for spellcasters. It has limited spell immunity, so if it's a 3rd level or lower spell, it automatically succeeds on the saving throw, and spells of that nature that make attack rolls automatically miss it. And it also has a pretty cool reaction where it rebounds the spell to hit a different target. It's a pretty gnarly stat block that I think is really awesome. I do like to see a little bit of these stat blocks that target specific styles of play. So if you want to challenge a player, particularly a spellcaster, you can employ these Gramishkas.
I also really like that these are CR 1/8 creatures. That means you can throw a couple of these at a 1st level party if you really want to see that Gramishka swarm pop up. And it just has a lot going on for a creature of such low CR, which is part of why, for me, it ranks so high on this list. And our number 1 favorite creature stat block from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft is the Priests of Osybus. These evil necromancers trap the souls of creatures they kill on tattoos on their body. By using these souls to enrich their necromantic powers, they allow themselves to escape death. Not only do these priests have a huge block of juicy lore that you can use to help world build them and use as motivation for them, but their stat block is also so interesting and so deadly for a CR6 creature. First off, their attacks have an auto-paralyze effect if they hit, meaning that a dedicated priest can shut down a target. They have a bonus action ability that allows them to summon shadows as minions, which is cool. And I think my favorite part of this stat block is that when they die, at the start of their next turn, you roll on a table and they come back with an ability from the table rolled. This is a super hardy monster stat block, as there are only 2 ways to kill him for good, and that's either while they're down to destroy their tattoo, or if they go down and they roll a number on the table that they've already rolled. Altogether, this stat block really does a good job of reinforcing the lore and giving the feeling of these undying priests who you just can't kill.
Yeah, these guys are absolutely no joke. They have dark vision, they have a ranged option in addition to their soul blade, and those boons of undeath are really cool and add a lot of variety to fights with them. And all in all, I could totally see a campaign totally centered around these guys. They have an interesting stat block, crazy awesome lore, and I think if you tried, you could easily de-level them or level them up for a full running campaign.
So those are our favorite monsters from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. What are some of your favorites? Let us know in the comments down below. If you made it this far in the video, I can't tell you how much that has already helped the channel, but if you want to leave a like or a comment, or if you like the kind of content we do here, please consider subscribing.
Before we leave, we just wanted to say a super big thank you to our patrons for May. That's Faison, Ahmad, Painted Sky, and Robert Allen Klaus III. Thank you guys so much. Your support means the world to us.
Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you on your next short rest.